Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Sunday Podcast, presented by sportsshoes.com. I'm Ollie Lum.
And I'm Matt Seddon.
This podcast is all about elite distance running in the UK.
We're here to give you all the latest news updates around the sport,
as well as weekly interviews with athletes and coaches.
Stay up to date by following us on Instagram and X at Sunday Podcast.
And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel too, where we post athlete workout videos, shoe reviews and more.
Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy the episode.
Okay, hello and welcome back to another episode. Quite a short one from myself and Matt today in terms of discussing some races and stuff. But obviously, there's a few things to cover. Obviously, later in the podcast, as you'll have seen from the name of the episode, Jack Rowe back on the pod after a few years away and obviously flying at the moment, fresh off that 7:38 3,000 meters. So we'll get into that later on. But Matt, obviously, about area cross-country champs, a few indoor performances, but not too much in the athletics world this week.
Nah, there's been some good performances out there, to be fair. One that springs to mind for me was Georgia Bell's 8:42 over 3K. I was commentating on it, so I think that's probably why it's still in my head. But that was a fine display of distance running, and look, it was a good race. It was a European circuit race, but it was by no means like she wasn't really on a train. She had to close a big gap. She did that, and then she had to kind of kick on, and she was off the front of that race with a K or 800 to go. And I just think she is flying. Like I really do think she is going to be pushing for a spot at the Paris Olympic Games. And I think we've got some very, very talented 1500 women, so she might not make that team, but I don't know. I just have a feeling when you look at like Millie Courtney, Muir, and Snowden like last year, like that is a serious crop of athletes. So I'm excited to see what Belle can do and what team she decides or what event she decides to really attack. You think it would be the 1500, but with that 3K, maybe she'll look towards the 5K in the summer, and maybe look to attack that, because obviously at the 15 and the 5 probably is slightly less competition, should we say, for that 5. But I don't know, that's probably unfair to say as well. I think they're both stellar. But anyway, she's flying. One to keep an eye on for sure. Callum Elson ran I think 357 mile at that same meet as well. So solid opener for him. Adam Fogg 353, big run. That was over in the Armory. Dave Malarkey, I don't think we mentioned him last week, 7:42. McCluckey, 7:47. There's some of the notable performances. I know people have been competing, but notable performances. And in Lum, of course, we had the area cross champs as well, which worth just talking about a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think it's good to see that these races still being kind of attended by some of like your top cross country athletes. Obviously, had like James Kingston, one of the Southerns, and Jess Gibbon on the women's side. Then we had Tom Evans and Gemma Steele kind of taking those Midlands titles, and then Callum Johnson and Lauren McNeil taking the Northern titles. So amongst those athletes there, you've got some top cross athletes, and that's good that we're seeing that, I think, in these area champs, particularly in a period where we are almost spoiled with the amount of high class racing we have. So I think that's why at the beginning of the episode I said it's almost a quiet week for us, but we still had area champs, and like you say, some great performances indoors too.
Yeah, man. I think the notable, or why people should pay attention to those area champs, is because usually they're going to be right up there at national cross, if not Kingston did double last year, Southerns and nationals. I think he's going to be pretty close at this year. But you look at those names, Tom Evans, I mean, he ran exceptionally well at that London International Cross. If he does national cross, he could certainly be a man who's going to contest for the victory there and may even run away with it. He looks to be in very, very good shape on the mud at the moment. And Callum Johnson as well. And then the same on the women's side. You look at like Gemma Steele, her history on the mud, it's a no-brainer. Like, she's probably going to be gearing towards that national cross, and Lauren McNeil as well. So yeah, slowly building, and all athletes we should be looking out for when we hit that national cross preview in probably a week or maybe even a week or two's time, man, because it's flying. February, well, we're already in Feb now. The year seems to be flying along. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up some of the key performances we highlighted, like you said, Lum, and we'll preview what's coming up next week. I mean, we don't need to talk about Boston too much. That was done and dusted. We mentioned it a little bit with Rowe in this podcast, but should we get stuck in and get chatting to Jack Rowe, because he's had a pretty spectacular few years from when we last spoke to him.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get straight into that Jack Rowe episode. And it was great to hear from him. And obviously, it's quite nice, I think, getting an athlete's perspective in between races. Obviously, he's just ran that 3K. He's preparing for the 5. But as always, we'll let Jack do the talking because he's the best one for that. So enjoy this episode. Okay, Jack, firstly, welcome back to the podcast. Great to have you back. Last time we spoke to you, we kind of checked you were unsponsored, just got your first GB senior vest indoors. I think you just beat Butchie at the trial. So a lot's changed for you. Whereabouts in the world are you right now, though? And where are you kind of at with your season?
Brilliant. Yeah, so currently up training in Albuquerque. As I said, sponsored by Puma now, which is really cool. Really excited, good people, enjoying working with that brand. And part of the allure of joining Puma was being able to come and join this Puma Elite training group that are normally based in North Carolina. And they've got some great depth over the 5K to 10K, some good 1500 speed as well. So been up here was here for 3.5 weeks, raced in Boston, up here for another 2-3 weeks, and then we're going to go back to Boston for another 5K. Have a go at that Olympic qualifying time, which will be really cool. And then we're going to see what happens after that, because there's the Sound 10K running kind of mid-March that I'm thinking about targeting as well. So it's whether I stay out in the US and carry on training with these guys or fly back to the UK, or got a few different options right now. Just trying to work out the best one. And but yeah, no, in a really good spot. So really enjoyed training with them. It's been when you just put yourself in a group situation like this, you get elevated. You know, everything's a little bit better. You dot all the I's, cross all the T's. So I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, mate. I mean, I've had the privilege of going on a camp with you, and you do seem to level up on camp. Like, you are someone who, one, responds to them well, but two, I think you hit the nail on the head there. You know, you dot the I's and cross the T's. Like, you just do all the little things, which sometimes, is it fair to say, you struggle to do at home?
Yeah, I do struggle. Like I was saying to the guys the other day that my standard week in the UK is almost, it's so different to what I'm doing out here. You know, like every day of the week back home, something's on. It's not even like I'm looking to go out and do things, but you know, I coach Tuesday, Thursday, you know, so that, you know, that's a few hours in the evening, and I love it. You know, I wouldn't change it, but it means there's, you know, it's 2-3 hours that I'm out on my feet. Every day you're driving to go and, you know, train at different places, run with different groups. And like, yeah, it's just not easy, you know, and also I don't enjoy just sitting on my bed and doing nothing. But being out here, that's been very much the case of like, you run, you eat, and then, you know, the training's going to be hard. You just have to get ready for the next one. So I've been enjoying it. And also when you do see the level rise and the fitness come, like, it's exciting. So you're almost like, all right, yeah, crap, I actually just want to go to bed because I've got that big one tomorrow. So I need to go to bed.
Yeah, talking about some of that fitness then, obviously 7:38 the other week, and probably not just the time as well, but looking super strong and taking the win. Did Boston live up to the hype for you?
It did. Like, part of the reason to go and do that 3K was to see the lay of the land. You know, I've got a big, you know, I need the race of my life in a few weeks over that 5K. Need to make a big step, and so I wanted to go check the travel, check the city. What does the commute into the track look like? How does the track feel? And honestly, we did pre-meet with Ian Crow, right, and Amon the day before. I kind of walked out and I was like, kind of crazy underwhelming. You know, there's 5 or 6 tennis courts, and it's just this indoor track that's just round the outside. You know, it's not even a true purpose-built, you know, track and field facility. It's not like a New Balance or a Hayward Field that you would expect these kind of like level of results to come out of. And then you go back the next evening and you just watch, like, what an evening of athletics, and you're like, right, yeah, there's nothing underwhelming about the level of times and runs that come out of that facility. So no, really, really cool. They've relayed the surface. Everyone was asking, like, how does the new surface feel? And I was like, I'm sorry, I wasn't here for the old one, but the new one does just fine. So no, it was really cool. Like, I was trying to explain it to a friend, and like, it's almost like Valencia road running. You guarantee good conditions. It's indoors. The fields are always ridiculously stacked. Like, there are plenty of people who will go and run a time at Valencia in a 10K, half marathon that won't be able to replicate that anywhere else. And that's almost kind of how it felt. I was watching those 5Ks go sub 13, watching them go 7:53, 7:54 at 3K. And that's normally when you go, this is about to get tough. These guys are about to falter. They've got to close in 5:10 now for 2K. And they just like looked at each other and went 30, 30, 30, 30, 29, 29. And you're like, it didn't look that hard. It was crazy. And I was like, that was the biggest thing. I was like, all right, it gave me some sense of like, okay, this is doable. But no, very cool track. The atmosphere is unreal. Like, I can imagine when Galen Rupp was flying around there, in the past, and when, Kajelcha was going for world records, like, even the atmosphere that night with those 2 5K heats was pretty special. So enjoying it.
I just think, I think it has got a little bit of hate, the meet, and the event. I'm sure you've seen that yourself, man. But I think it's just the doing of World Athletics, raising those marks or lowering the standards, shall I say? And I think now, like you said, people have to go there to, when the standard was 13:20 45 years ago, or people didn't have to seek out such exclusive meets, but now they do. And so I think, and athletes are hitting that mark. So I almost feel like give it another 2 years and the whole, inviting athletes on invite only, that probably won't even exist, because I think people will just be nailing the standard.
Yeah, no, I think it will be completely full with standards. Someone reached out to me the other day and was like, "Oh, are you excited to go world indoors?" And I was like, "I'm miles off world indoors." I was like, the qualifying times,
tough qualifying though, yeah,
7:34.0, and then they were like, "Oh, but there's invites, surely there's an invite list." And I looked, and I think 13 of the 15 are time already.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 7:34 indoors, or we're talking about 12:50 outdoors, or 7:29 outdoors. And some of those will scratch. A few of those athletes aren't going to race indoors. But it's like, I do think it will come to a point where invites and rankings aren't a thing. But you set a bunch of athletes to target, and eventually they'll hit it. There might be a slight lag when you're taking such chunks off these times, but yeah, it's scary to think in a few years' time that the qualifying time might be 13 flat. And what percentage of them come from a race in Boston in February.
Yeah, obviously it's something that, sorry mate, obviously it's something that you've had to kind of prep for. And one thing we wanted to chat to you about, obviously choosing not to go to kind of Euro cross country champs. When did you decide that Boston was going to be the one that you target? And obviously I'm sure that kind of came into that decision too.
Kind of off the back end of the track season. I had it in my mind already. I almost went for the marathon. So I ran big half. Unfortunately, I had a friend's wedding that next week, so I couldn't go and try out for the road 5K, which I really wanted to do at Worlds, because that was part of the plan of building my resume, building some points, because it's a great opportunity to go and run fast. That's another way of potentially getting one of these crazy 5K times is, the Adidas breaking records. Multiple guys have gone under 13:05 like that before. So I was actually thinking on a super quick day, with 40 mil super shoes on a fast course, was that a potential way of getting towards 13:05? Because outdoors on the track, so few Brits have done it. You are looking for these niche ways of getting there. So yeah, coming off the end of the road season, I was looking at, I normally do a Hampshire League, and then I come and do Liverpool, and then I quite like to plan slightly further forward. So I was looking, what's my training looking like going through Christmas? What's my training like looking through Feb? And I just kind of worked backwards. And I just didn't feel like I had enough time to step up the training how I wanted to step it up, get the quality in, get the speed in. And, it's like, well, the week before Liverpool, you taper down because it's a huge domestic race. You have to be on your A game. I'm not a guy that can run 110, 150 mile a week, the week of Liverpool, and just train through it. The week after Liverpool, you've got to come down because there has to be some aspect of recovery in there. The week tapering into Europeans, because that's an even harder race if you can, potentially make it. And then there's a recovery aspect the week of Europeans, and it's like, well, Christ, that's a month. I remember speaking to Mark Scott. I was like, I'm don't have that muscle memory of a 12:57 5K in my legs. I need everything to go my way, and I don't have time to lose a month. And we did change my training quite specifically post Eurocross, and I was doing stuff that I couldn't have done if I had the fatigue and I had the whole build up to Eurocross and the come down. Was doing some great track work with Joe Wickfield. Craig Winrow was helping me a lot down at St Mary's, and we got some really good stuff and some really good foundation stuff that once I came and joined this group, if I hadn't done that, I'd have just got blown away. But I think it's really let me, like, the first session keep up rather than been like, all right, Jack's like backdoor 50 meters out. So no, it was a shame not to do Eurocross. Actually, no, saying that, I watched the course and I was like, thank God I'm not doing that. So that wasn't a shame. Like I'd have been toasted on that course. So, but it's a shame to miss an event like that because it's good fun and there's a good team aspect to it, and there was a good bunch of guys on it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, mate, you mentioned about weighing up the chances of doing a marathon, or the perks of doing a marathon. That must have been quite a tough decision for you, because I know you had a lot of people in your ear sort of saying, look, that standard, you've run an exceptional half, low 60 and a half, like surely you can go run a 208. But did you deem the track to be harder from that point? Like, what made you stick to the track and shoot for that 5K?
My ego wants to hit the 5K, definitely, so I don't want to leave that behind. The problem with the road was you had two options, really, three, but the third one was a bad option. Valencia was the key one. If I'd really been clever about it, I should have sacked Cross off and just gone, hey, from big half, take your week off, and then you've got 9, 10, 11 weeks. I think you could do enough of a build, enough. I've done 20, 21 mile long runs. I haven't done them quick, but I think enough of that muscle conditioning is there. But we just didn't quite make that call early enough. And as my coach rightly said, we're only having that conversation because you ran well at big half. If you'd run 62 high at big half, no one would have gone, oh, you can run 2.8 in Valencia in 12 weeks time. So we kept the training same all the way through to Christmas. And then I was like, what about Seville? And I really did do an hour about it because, the Puma Fast R2 shoes are ridiculous. So I was like, to be able to run, to be able to run a qualifying time in that level of shoe is easier. But the problem was, if you look at how the outdoor season stacks up with, Europeans being early, no trial in the 5K. If I hit Seville, I've almost gone through all the Boston races indoor, the sound races outdoor, with no qualifying time over a 5 or a 10. I've got no hit, which then means you're forced into doing Highgate. That's your one attempt. And it's like, well, what if it blows a hoolie at Highgate and 28:20 is an actually outstanding run? And it's like, well, that's no qualifying time. And then you're chasing a 5K in between then. And so it just didn't set the season up very well. And then the last chance was London, which in my mind, it feels wrong to debut a marathon anywhere other than London. I love racing in London. All my mates are on the course. I know the area. It takes me 20 minutes to get to the start line. It feels right. But is it the best place to go and chase a super hard qualifying time on debut? Probably not. So yeah, that was kind of that was the crux of it, was it's all legs in on Seville, and it's a tough egg to crack on debut. And if you miss, then you're really limiting your chances to have a successful track season.
Yeah. With all that in mind, then you've obviously had some serious thought about the roads. I guess it's too early to say. Will you look to do a marathon in the near future, in the next 12, 18 months, or because of Paris, and then obviously LA is going to be four years away. You'll kind of stay on the track at least until LA. Like there isn't a rush to go to the roads now.
No, not, I think the better you run on the track. I've had not butted heads with my coach and agent, but he manages my agent manager, Malcolm Anderson, manages a very successful Ethiopian road running team, and his thought process has always been, once you go a marathon, you go a marathon. These guys go away and they prepare hard at altitude for 4 months. There's no build-up race. It's just it's a different level of training. It's a different type of training. And it's very hard to flip track races or even shorter road races into these. And that's not really something that like super grabs me at the moment. I'd want a slightly more hybrid, do a marathon, do some shorter road racing, do Highgate, do a 5K, like kind of stay slightly more involved. But I do think I'll run one at some point in the near future. I just think, I'm interested to see what I can do, because those 3 races at Big Half have all felt pretty good. I'm a big guy. I think running in a straight line, I think that's what I'm built for. None of this turning every 100 meters. So I think a marathon's coming pretty soon, and I'm excited to do it. Probably not London to start off with. Go get one in the bag, and then see kind of how it shakes out. But I'm watching people like Phil. I'm watching people like Mohammed, and there was a little bit of like, I wish I was in there too. How would I have stacked up at Valencia? How would I have stacked up? I'm looking forward to watching Emil go, in a fast one soon. Because some of the guys I was training with in Samuel Barata, the Portuguese guy, ran 2.7 mid. He was on sub 2.6 pace till 30K. So, these guys are going after it. So, and it's cool. The US marathon trials are on Saturday, so it's been quite interesting hearing like the American aspect this week and who's and the different system that they use for selection. So, no, I will run one soon. I'm excited to. So,
yeah. I think everyone else in the UK is excited to see what you do over the marathon as well at some point. But obviously, you have chosen the 5K. How are you feeling ahead of that Boston race, and sort of what's the training look like in between? Because you mentioned obviously you did some hard work before the 3K, but after a 7:38, obviously there's part of you that's probably sort of thinking, I don't want to actually mess anything up either. So like, how do you manage that period between races like that?
Yeah, no, definitely. The 7:38 was really good. The training was good going in. It's just the level of quality you can knock out with a group that's this good. You turn up and you've got an 11K top track session. We've got Amon, Kimboy, Paddy, Diva, and we've actually got 2 really, really good Japanese athletes that are coming and training with us too. One's 27:20 and the other's mid 8:20s on the steeple. So if you have a 12K track session, you might only take a K, 1,200 a mile. So the ability to just also, for that time trial aspect, to just lock in, get on the rail, and like this mile rep's going to hurt, this 1,200 meter rep's going to hurt. It's been really good. So, but no, I'm feeling really good for the 5K. I actually had an entry in the 5K that weekend when I ran a 3, and like we kind of oohed and ahed about it of like, oh wow, those heats look good. I'd probably have snuck in one of those 2 fast heats, but in the past I've been guilty of making a plan and then not sticking to it. So I think this time we quite like the progression of the mile up here at altitude, use that to spin and hurt the legs, which made the 3K a lot more achievable. And then I've now got 3 more weeks to layer on top, and that 3K's brought me on nicely. Like I did a session. I remember you did a podcast with Butcher once, and you asked him what his best ever session was, and he said like, on paper, the stats of this session were probably my best, but actually your best ever session is hitting paces and how easy it feels. And I think I probably had that on Tuesday, where I was just running and I was like, wow, okay, fair enough. Like it wasn't sparkling or dazzling on paper, but I was like, I feel like this is a 2 or 2 seconds slow per lap. And it was exciting. So no, all really positive. We're all locked in. We're all, even as you said, you're scared of you're flying home on that 7-8 hour flight back from Boston, the connection, and like you hear someone cough and you just like dive away from it because you're like, got your mask on, you're like in the corner, you're like, it's all the little things you start. I'm in the shape of my life, and you kind of want to hold on to that. But I think talking about those 5Ks, like the big thing was it proved that, before this, it was a Mark Scott on potentially the best ever Bowerman train of all time that could run that. Whereas now it's like, Sam Atkin got in there and did it, and he led from 3K to 4K as well. That was an impressive run. George Mills got in there and did it on his second ever 5K. He looked astoundingly good. He just took the race by the horns and ripped it apart, really. So it was actually, as much as I was standing there thinking, oh, well, my 3K run just got thrown out the back door here, 2 sub-13s on the night by Brits, but it was actually really encouraging that, it's doable. I know British Athletics have set these crazy times, but, with the right level of training, the right level of race, and a little bit of luck, these times aren't completely unattainable.
Well, mate, we got 2 blokes have already nailed the time. You're going to attack it. I presume Paddy's in some good shape, and he's going to attack it at some point as well. We could, the British champs, the 5K could actually mean something. With Westy can get down to it, we'll see. But mate, I mean, one thing that I think I was pretty impressed with that indoor mile up at altitude, 357, and I know it like people will lumina. Huh?
I wish it was a 57. 59.
Oh, 359, sorry, mate. But it equated to what it convert to, 354 or something.
354.
354, supposedly. And I know people are like and ah, but is it fair to say you have developed that speed? You mentioned a little bit about training with with Wiggy and Craig Wimmer's group. You looked, and when you won that 3K the other day, you looked a lot sharper. You've been quite pleased with how that speed's progressed.
Yeah, definitely. Like we put a big emphasis on it before we left. And there's been a huge emphasis within this group as well, so the training schedules changed a little bit. It's not the typical just like week to week to week structure. It kind of it moves around races, which is cool. It keeps you on your toes a little bit because you never quite know what's coming. But it's very similar to the old Bowerman styles of like, pure speed being in there. And that's something that I haven't done in the past. And so although it hurt badly at the beginning, my percentage improvement at the beginning is quite large. So, we were doing stuff that was like really for me, essentially, nearly a flat out 400, 35 seconds rest, and then a flat out 300, multiple times per session, and so I think I PB'd in a 300 like twice in one session the other week. So I think that kind of stuff, having the group to be able to drag you through that, because you could be going 2 or 3 seconds slower on a windy day back in the UK, and that level of quality is just nowhere near the same. So but there's been a huge emphasis on it. So much training under race pace. I think that was maybe one of my drawbacks of my camp in Flagstaff last May. Was I ran within a tenth in 2 5Ks 3 weeks apart. I ran 13:20.1 and 13:20.0, and so and me personally, I felt like there was more there. But a lot of people have said, "Well, hell, mate, you just run 2 3Ks and you're within a tenth." I think that's kind of where you're at. You're kind of redlining, and I think if you looked at the amount of training that was sub 64 second pace in the 4-6 weeks before that, I don't think it was high enough. Whereas this time, we all know what that 13:05 average is, and we've been doing a heavy chunk of training way under that. So I would say, I was saying to the guys, I think my volume of training sub 58 pace, I've done more this year than I did in the entirety of last year.
Wow. Yeah. And I was going to ask
in a month.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, exactly what did that speed training look like? But you kind of answered it. It's just basically, would you just do a session and shove a few flat out reps on the end of it? Or would you dedicate a whole session to just running flat out?
Dedicate that. Yeah, a whole session will be that way. So that's why, it's not this staple, I'm very big at, me at home Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, long run Sunday. And they're not all flat out sessions, but they're all, good volume, tempo, threshold, and then a harder VO2. Whereas this kind of changing schedule of like, we'll train on a Wednesday, we'll train on a Friday, we'll train on a Monday, it allows you to be a little bit more flexible. You have to drop your ego, and you lose the miles that week. But it's so beneficial because you can't run that stuff if you're running 15, 16 miles a day. You need to taper off, the day before, even the day before that, so that your legs are fresh enough to be able to get what you need out of this stuff. And I think it was showing, that's my fastest close. I haven't felt this sharp since probably the last time I spoke to you guys, actually. Euro Indoors crazy. 2021, to actually feel this sharp. Because those guys in the 3K were low 330, man. And so that's the other thing is, kicking always hasn't been my strong point, but to kick off 61s as well is a different ball game as well. So
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that you haven't felt kind of as sharp almost since that race, kind of 3 years ago now. But at the same time, what you have done over the past 3 years, and Matt and I were kind of saying before, you've probably been one of the most consistent guys on the kind of British elite scene. Why do you think that is? Because you seem to be able to, any time of year, any race you rock out at, whether it's road, track, cross, you're consistently amongst the top Brits.
I don't know. Like, I think, Matt, you said this before to me. You kind of said that you never really have a bad day in training. Like, you never really have a bad day at a long run. Do you know what I mean? You get out there and you get it done. And I do think that's, lots of people are like, oh, I raced crap today because I just felt, I don't really get that. I don't know what it is. I just wake up and I'm ready to go. And like, there's a few races where I think I've fallen down in, Highgate was pretty poor a few years ago. I went out too quick, but I think it was almost the goal setting that day was wrong. My like bare minimum goal was to run 27:30, and as soon as that wasn't there, then I just like shut it down. Whereas like, you can't really set your bare minimum goal as a minute PB on the track or something. There needs to be some fallback of like, all right, let's go under 28, and if you're feeling great, let's push on from there. But I don't know. I've been very lucky in training. I haven't missed much time at all. I haven't had any injuries. Very small. I might have missed 3 days a year. With a sore Achilles or something like that. My mileage has been very, very good. It's been building the last few years of, 80, 90, 80. I think last year was 90 mile a week average with time off, weeks off, and all the training, So I think that just builds you such a nice base of consistency that on race day, it's always there. And I try not to take it too seriously. I remember I was driving in Flagstaff last May, and I had this big 5K coming up, and I'd run 13:20, and it was good, and I got some good press, but I really wanted to step on, and I was like, well, shit, like, what if you run worse? Do you know what I mean? Like, what if you blow up and run 13:30 again, and you're actually going backwards? And then like thought for a second, I was like, no one actually cares. You know what I mean? Like, if I run 13:30 the next day, I might get a few messages off my mates like, "Oh, mate, that sucks." And I was like, "Yeah, it does." But then at the end of the day, like, next day, no one cares. It's quite I know chasing these Olympics is great, and I really want to go to Paris, and it's all in. But yeah, I think sometimes people get a little bit too caught up on stuff, and it's just running, and we're meant to do this because we enjoy it.
You do want to go to Paris, mate. You've got a bit of a personal connection there as well, haven't you? Because the missus is Parisian.
Yeah. So I'm excited for that. It doesn't line up like this very often. So I've got the support crew set in Paris. I just need to find a way to get there. So,
have they got tickets, or has any family got tickets yet? Or is that really jinxing things?
My whole household my Putney household has tickets for the 5K heats. So when I was thinking like, I might run the 10, see if I can run 27:20, they're like, oh, mate,
Don't you dare!
So
Don't
they're
you
like,
dare!
do you know how much that Airbnb cost we booked? So
Oh, I know.
yeah,
Wait, the tickets as well, though. I mean, how much were they getting tickets for? Just out of interest.
I think they were like it went 180 for the session, which like is not cheap, but it's not the ridiculous levels I've heard
No,
of, like 600-750 for a ticket.
that's crazy. And I guess that's probably the cheapest one, is it? Like around that mark. That's
Oh, they're
wicked.
probably up in the rafters, yeah. So they
Yeah,
paid to come see me, but they probably
yeah.
get a better view on the TV.
Oh man. Well, moving on from that, I was gonna just you kind of mentioned it earlier on in the episode about their 2024 plans. So you're gonna hit this 5K, which is I thought it was in like a week or two's time. Is it 3 weeks time, Boston?
It's floating. It's floating
Right.
floating on the down low.
Um, so Boston, then potentially Sounder. I guess yeah. I guess it's up in the air at the moment whether you attack a Highgate, or do you think you could attack Highgate and then still try and attack a 5, or would it have to be all or nothing for the 10?
No, that's the plan. So race in Boston, hopefully check off that 5K time, and then stick around for that sound running 10K March 16th. And then at that point, I'll have a pretty good understanding of, where my 5 sits, where my 10 sits. Because 10, obviously, you can qualify via ranking through World Athletics, but it's tough, especially after you add in those cross country rankings.
World Cross,
You
yeah, as well.
you practically need to be top 12 ranked in the world that haven't run sub 27, and when you add the cross country rankings in, which is doable, but it's not easy, because they want that small field side of 27. And then I'll be back to the UK. We'll be home for about 6 weeks, and then planning to target Highgate May 18th. So I'm gonna race that this time, which will be fun. It's an event, kind of always look forward to doing, but haven't actually run that many times. So we'll run Highgate. We'll then see how the European selection goes. They released that the other week, the qualifying criteria. So it was quite interesting that how they're going to pick it. They didn't really say how they were going to pick it. So at all. So
That
which will
frustrating
be
for you
fun.
as an athlete? Is that just a bit like, oh man, like I want to plan my season. Maybe I'd want to use
Yeah.
Europeans, but you can't.
Yeah, I just assumed that they'd have to pick it on season's best.
Yeah.
There's no other way of picking it, because if you're not going to have a trial, then it has to be the fastest 3 people that want to go. But that's not what they said. So what did they say? They said it could be a contribution of any of the following factors.
Yeah.
And they could also completely disregard any of the following factors, depending on what they want. So it's like okay. But if you run a fast 10K, there's not too many opportunities. So I think if you run well at Sound, that sets you up quite nice. Obviously it depends, Atkin and George have got relatively strong position from here. And then and see where my time is. There's a few good 5Ks in Europe, in and around British Champs, obviously end of June, and then London Diamond League is stated to have a 3K or 5K on the men's side, which is huge. So even if people don't need to chase that for qualifying times, I think it's good to put on a good show and show that there are, as you mentioned earlier, there's really good strength of depth in the men's 5K right now. I was having this conversation the other day that, in 2016, when Butchart was flying and won the British Champs very easily, there was that COVID year when Mark Scott won the British Champs 5K very easily. I was a 13:54 guy going into that race, and I came second. If you look at the depth of that 5K British Champs last year, there was probably 8-9 guys under 13:30. And then there was guys missing as well. So as you said, I think the 5K could be really, 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 really exciting. Like if you look at the last 5K Diamond League that was held in the UK, it was Gateshead in 2021. 2021. That year Gateshead got 2. Me, Butchart, and Jake Smith were given slots, and Johnny Davies. And it's like, if you look at the PBs that we had going into that race, especially, me, Jake Smith, we, weren't typical 5K guys at the time. There's no way 30 and 35 guys are getting slots in that London Diamond League in July. So I do think that it's really pushed forward, which is exciting. But yeah, I think we need to put on, as a bunch of Brits, need to put on a good performance in that, get some guys low 13 people in the race. So yeah, I'm excited to try and hopefully be part of that, but you got to be running fast. If you're on 30, 20, you're not going to be anywhere near that race.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I think exciting times ahead, and we can even see on this call now, like you seem really excited with your shape and the races coming up. So, wishing you all the best for that. And just before we finish, then you mentioned the fast R2s already, but what's your kind of Puma rotation at the moment? Because they're actually on sports shoes. I believe they launched this week already. So great timing for us too.
Yeah. No, they're about to drop. They've taken a while actually. So, yeah, Puma. It was funny. They released them to us back in August, and obviously, when you release a promo shoe, it's meant to be kind of like a small drop, and then everyone realized quite how good these things were, and blew up quite so quickly, and then they were like, well, they're not stated to be released until February, so it'd be cool once they're actually kind of fully on the market. They're nuts. They are. A very, very, very good racing shoe. So I'd be interested to see how they stack up to a current Vaporfly or any of the other top brands, because that's the main thing is people are matching up. But this shoe, so I couldn't race in this shoe at World Half. So I raced in the Fast R2 at Big Half, loved it, and then raced in it at Vitality, the 10K. And then because it was a promo shoe, I couldn't wear it at World Half. And honestly, my biggest takeaway from World Half is the fact I could get within 30 seconds in the old shoe. It's like, so I ran 61 like low at Big Half and 61. I think it was bang on 30 seconds. And I was like, I can get within 30 seconds. So it's not all the shoe then. Like there's a little bit, but that's me running. But no, that's coming out soon, which is really fun. There's a deviated lead coming out soon as well, which I've heard is pretty special. And I think there's quite a few new shoes about to drop actually, because I'm obviously hanging with all the US guys, and I'm like, what shoe is that? Yeah, they've all got a different mix. So yeah, no, the Magnify is my go-to every day. But these guys are all in a Magnify too that I've never seen. So I'm quite excited to get my hands on a pair of them. And then try out this new DV8-3, which is kind of the slightly more normal looking super shoe.
Awesome, man. Yeah, well, thanks for that, and obviously thanks for coming on the pod today. And we'll catch you very soon. And best of luck for everything, mate. Fascinating to hear from Jack Rowe there, ahead of his kind of Paris first attempt, I guess, in the 5K in Boston in a week or so, a couple of weeks or so. We should probably check the date on that, but yeah, we know it's coming up. It's around the corner. It's the Valentine invite, so it must be 2 weeks. But yeah, super excited to see how he goes there. And I think one thing for me, Matt, that kind of highlighted from, as we spoke to him before, he was unsponsored sort of 3 years ago. The decision you make, like in terms of who you sign with, can make such a big difference, not just from the financial side or the kit you're getting, but Jack's talking there, and it's clear to see from that interview how much of an impact being on that camp with the Puma athletes in the US has had. And if you sign with a different brand, perhaps that opportunity is not always there for you, is it?
It's not at all. He's really, and I think just like we've seen kind of Jack's career slowly but steadily improve year on year. Puma, obviously, we're not kind of analyzing Puma's career, but I think as a brand, they have slowly and steadily got better and better and better, and they clearly invested more. And when Rowe first signed with them, they were quite low key. Yeah, not that many people were involved with the company, and we didn't see too many Puma athletes on the circuit. But I think with the setup of that group that he's in, sounds very, very strong. Obviously, Paddy Deeb is there as well. Looking forward to seeing what he can do this summer. And I think they are a brand to be reckoned with now. I mean, he just finished up there talking about that shoe. I want to get my hands on that shoe because I remember when he first wore it, he said it was pretty special. And for an athlete who obviously pre-working with Puma was in a lot of different brands, and look, runners know, he'll know what split he's hitting and what splits he can hit, in the shoe versus without the shoe. And I think that's credit to Puma who are now keeping up and giving athletes like Jack a good chance.
Yeah, definitely. And we've spoken about these shoe wars plenty of times on this podcast. But again, like the playing field is pretty level now. All the brands are doing good things. I think it means people can actually kind of have a bit more personal preference as well, like the consumer, rather than like your unsponsored athletes having to go with one or the other. They can actually think, oh, which brand do I think represents something that I like, or maybe even just like you like how it looks or how it feels, like rather than just thinking, oh, I have to go to one brand over another. So great to see, really, and I think just that camp atmosphere that he's talking about. You obviously been on camp with him as you mentioned in the pod. Clearly working out for him well, obviously in New Mexico at the moment. So excited to see how he gets on. And I think what's great to hear about like kind of Jack's perspective is he's not leaving the 5K just yet, because I think we've been I don't know. I think we've been guilty on it on the podcast too. We've always been like, oh, the reason we have no good marathon is because all our best 5K guys, they don't go to the marathon until too late. And then recently, everyone seems to have gone to the marathon and we're like, oh, well, now we've got no 5K guys. So we're almost kind of shooting ourselves in the foot there with Mark and Emil going to the marathon, which we're excited about, of course. But nice to see that some athletes are sticking it out for the 5K. What I would say as well, I think we've been so critical on the pod and everyone has, I think, on social media of British athletics lowering standards and making it super hard. But actually, as we kind of discussed with Rowe there, the standard has moved on because some of these standards are put in place. I think if you left the standard at 1320, for example, we don't need to improve. And like Jack said, he was 1354 when he came second at British champs. Realistically, that's not acceptable on the world stage. It's not acceptable to have second at British champs running that sort of time. So I think perhaps we can kind of eat our words a bit when we were complaining about the standards being lowered so much.
And I think you're dead right. Look, successful athletes, successful people, they step up. And I think when you talk to athletes, there was a bit of frustration to start with because obviously, while these standards were sinking in, they were going, geez, my job's just got a lot harder. But actually now, like, they don't care. And Jack is open and honest. They are finding ways. They are doing everything they can to go run these standards. And he was open and honest about the shoes. He was like, yeah, this helps. Obviously I'd be stupid not to go to Boston. Boston's been getting a lot of hate. These fast marathons get a little bit of hate and stuff. But you know what? The athletes don't care. They got a job to do. And look, the sport I was having this, discussion with a few people. You are judged on your ability to make a major championships. And if you don't make a major championships, you're in this kind of net, this pool of athletes who are good, but yeah, you haven't been to a major, so how good are you? And unfortunately, that's the sport's just become that way, and we all get really, really excited over major championships now, over world championships, over Olympic games, and that's how it is. And so athletes have to stay relevant. They have to fight for those spots, and they've stepped up. And I've actually been really impressed with quite a few athletes how they have just stepped up and they haven't cared the standards have got harder, that people will come out and say, well, you're actually only worth X, Y, and Z. They're just cracking on with it and they're getting the job done. And Rowe, that really hit home to me on that podcast with Rowe there. And he's going away on these camps and he's doing everything in his power that, he's improving his speed now. And I think everyone's doing that at the top level. And the only people who are kind of moaning and fussing are the people like us who are hanging on to old records.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always going to change, isn't it? And hopefully it takes a bit of emphasis off the records in a way. Like because we're moving so fast in terms of timelines, we can't compare times from before. And I think that can only be a good thing. I'm always an advocate. Look at people's race results, how many races they win, how many titles did they take, how many medals they got, for example. Like that's more important. So maybe we'll get to the point where we don't need those times at all, kind of looking back in history. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up that episode. I think Jack did a great job of talking through that. He's seasoned pro on these interviews now. But obviously we got some races coming up next as well prior to that Boston meet. So what have we got, Matt? Obviously Armagh on Thursday. Obviously now a sports shoes event as well. So great to see that. That should be an interesting one, particularly for, I guess, some of you listeners. I'm sure you're all heading out to Armagh as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, talk about fast times and fake PBs. I'm sure we're going to see a few at Armagh. I certainly hope we will see a few because I've got a few athletes running there myself. So I certainly hope they can go get the job done and run some fast times. And at the end of the day, that's it. It is fun. It's fun for athletes, and so I support that. That event is historic. And we were actually talking about Milrose Games coming up next weekend as well, and how that has such a weight in the indoor calendar. It's such a historic event, and winning and even competing there is a bit of achievement, and it's a little bit of an accolade.
Yeah, I think so, mate. And that's something that, look, I was quite critical of Boston last week on a pod, and I won't shy away from that, mainly because they separated the A race, which I'd have actually, yeah, they might run a bit slower, but I'd just love to see those guys battle it out because it would actually provide some excitement at this time of year rather than just time chasing. But I'm not being funny. If Boston can start building the same reputation as Milrose and creating its own history by actually having a race that people want to go back to every year, not just to run a fast time, but to win as well, like they do that want to make a mile at Milrose, I think that can only be a good thing going forward. And that's why I've always tuned into Milrose, because I think it's fascinating to see the mile run indoors. I like how they still run the mile there over the 1500. I think there's a time and a place, and that's a perfect time and a place for it is Milrose Games. So it's going to be super interesting to see who goes there. Obviously, I think we got Josh Kerr going from a British perspective, which should be great as well.
Mm. Oh, we do. Let's have a look at a few of those lineups. I mean, just looking now at the women's mile. We're going to get to see Muir and Snowden do battle, and that's from a British perspective anyway. And the field, I mean, Jess Hole, all the usual suspects. Jess Hole, Ellie Puri is in there. Sage Klecker's in there. Sinclair Johnson, Josette Andrews. So women in very good form. But yeah, I think Muir would look at that. Can she get the season off to a win? Gearing up for the World Indoors. It's going to be quite a key race for her, I think. But so yeah, very, very strong women's fields. I mean, you said Kerr going for that 2 mile world record. Interesting. I always think when you announce to me, Jack said as well, just off there, we were chatting to him, when you announce you're going for a record, everyone then just switches off and goes, okay, well, we don't need to go anywhere near the front. We can just sit on Josh. And you almost have to be that guy who slots in right behind the pacemaker if you're the one going for the world record and everyone knows it. So, and they'll file in behind you. So he's going to find himself in a tough position. But Jack's in New Mexico, Kerr's in New Mexico, and did say caught up with Kerr and watched him do a session, and it was very, very good. So, he's it's interesting though, Lon, because I think he's going to put his money where his mouth is. But we spoke to him in September, or like September, October time, was it? At the end of the season. It's easy to easy to be confident of the year coming up at that time of the season. But he continues every interview. He's saying more stuff about, he's going to win Paris, and he's talking a lot. And I think, if there's one guy who can back it up, it's probably him. And I don't think he would talk if he didn't believe he could back it up. But it's interesting because we're nearing, the races that start to matter, and he's still kind of sticking by his guns.
Yeah, I think it's great to see, because I think that the sport's crying out for some more people like this. And look, obviously, we know Jakob's had some injury problems, but Jakob, I'm sure, will still go into Paris as the favourite to win that 1500. But one of the things he'll have is that Wyman and Kerr, particularly Kerr, with the way he comes out, have got to be living in that guy's head rent free at the moment. And the more and more he keeps saying things like that in interviews, saying he's going after world records, saying he's going to win Paris, the more that's going to continue. If Kerr just goes silent now and waits until Paris again, I think he loses that advantage after last year. So I think you've got to capitalize on the fact you've won and continue just put pressure on Jakob, put pressure on everyone else, and be like, yeah, I'm the number one guy. Like
Mm.
if he keeps saying it, it's gonna manifest itself. And I think it was quite interesting. We obviously posted a few of our kind of quotes, clips from an interview with him, and we had a lot of people commenting sort of about Kerr, sort of saying, "Oh, I shouldn't be saying this after winning one race." And I'm just like, it was the race though. Like it
Mm.
wasn't just any old race.
Mm.
Like that people sort of commenting as if he just beat Jakob in a diamond league. That didn't matter. But
And
actually,
those same people will be moaning that people going around fast at Boston. So, which is effectively what Jakob does every race, right? He goes in time
mm,
trials. So it's yeah, there's an interesting man. I mean, talking of Jakob, he is well, his Instagram shows he's maybe just started back running. But he has been injured for a long, long time, and he's
especially
not.
for him, he seems like someone who's been consistent throughout his whole career. And by career, I mean from when starting like elite
Yep,
athletics at 12 years old.
yep.
So it's
It's
yeah,
gonna be it's gonna be
interesting.
fascinating. I mean, obviously his brothers have struggled with some serious, serious injuries. Um, and maybe their type of training. I mean, it's gonna demand a lot on the body. That's
Yeah.
obvious. So this and I always get a little bit concerned when athletes come out and say they have Achilles issues because it's very hard for them to go away, like ever go away properly. It seems to be an injury that just lingers. And yes, it might go away for a few months, then it kind of comes back, and you're in and out, and then you have to get surgery, and you hear about athletes not
Mm.
being the same after surgery. So, oh, at the moment, I actually think Kerr is probably more the favorite than Jakob right now.
I think for
Just
us, he definitely is for sure. But I think if you did a poll, mate,
mm.
I think all those Jakob fanboys out there would definitely get him on. But we're not putting you off, Jakob. If you're listening, we'd love to chat to you still, and maybe you'd go back into our number one choice. So, if anyone's got contact for Jakob Ingebrigtsen, we'd love to hear a response to Josh Kerr. So let us know. But
Hey,
anyway, yeah, other stuff to look forward to as well. Barcelona half, Mark Scott obviously spoke to Chris Jones last week. That episode's got some good traction as well. We've had some interesting perspectives from a few people. So just keep them coming. Like we appreciate kind of the conversations it starts. Doesn't always mean we kind of agree with everything presented in the podcast. We just give people a chance to speak through some of the processes they're going through there. So that's absolutely fine, but keep kind of engaging with that because I think it's interesting to hear from you as listeners.
mm, mm.
But yeah, obviously Mark's been working with Chris Jones, and he's kind of going into his first race since they've started working together. So yeah, be interested to see how that goes down. Matt, what do you expect from Mark? Is this going to be a kind of controlled half marathon performance in prep for London later down the line, or do you think you're going to see where he's at in terms of kind of actually trying to hit it?
Well, I've been speaking to Mark quite a bit actually, on the For the Kudos podcast, and he is someone who does like to kind of test his fitness and get after it in build up races. And Jack even mentioned it then. Mark's the same. He doesn't like the idea of going into a heavy training block for 4 months and racing a marathon. He wants to race. He wants to build up. I mean, we saw him at Rebel Valley. So this half, he will get after it. I think he's also someone who responds to kind of getting a little bit of a confidence boost. He has still been doing some speedier sessions as well to actually kind of, and I think that's with the half in mind. And the thing is, he's still got what after this, maybe 9, 10 weeks till London. So
Mm.
he's still got plenty of time to actually develop, that endurance even more and smash out those long, long runs and tempos and marathon pace sessions. So yeah, it'd be interesting because I think he will be going into this looking for a pretty swift half.
Yeah, definitely. So all that to come then, but that pretty much wraps us up, mate. We'll be back next week. Obviously looking like another guest as well, and obviously reviewing some of these races. You got Bucks. You're off to Bucks tomorrow, aren't you, mate? On the day we're recording for that, been done by the time this episode comes out. But I'm sure we'll be able to review that too.
Hmm. Absolutely,
Yeah.
mate. Bucks. And then we're gonna have New Balance Indoor Grand Prix currently taking place this weekend. So we're gonna have that review, and there's a Mets indoor meet, and goodness me, Armagh maybe we won't record till that's done and dusted. So we got a lot to talk about next week. So looking forward to that.
Okay, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you very soon.